Welcome to the channel, where we don't just talk coins, we uncover the hidden, the buried, the almost lost to history secrets the U.S. Mint never meant you to see. And today we're plunging headfirst into one of the most unnerving mysteries ever struck into metal, the 1987 P-quarter dollar, a coin so seemingly normal, so easy to overlook, that most Americans spent it without a second thought, never realizing they held in their hands a key to a numismatic cold case that's remained unsolved for nearly 4 decades. And the question that still haunts collectors, historians, and even former Mint employees is this: how did one of the most ordinary coins of the modern era become a breeding ground for the most inexplicable, mind-bending minting anomalies in U.S. history, and why does no one in official channels want to talk about it? What started as a quiet whisper among die-hard collectors has now snowballed into a full-blown obsession as more and more bizarre specimens surface, each with its own freakish traits, doubled features that don't match official die sets, misaligned strikes that appear almost intentional, and shadowy, translucent impressions of design elements that seem to float like ghosts beneath the surface of the coin. And it all circles back to one place: the Philadelphia Mint, 1987, a year that should have been boring, uneventful, the tail end of Reagan-era mint production with nothing new scheduled. No commemoratives, no special trials, and yet something went wrong. Or maybe, just maybe, something was done on purpose and then buried under layers of bureaucratic silence. Because no one can explain why so many 1987 P-quarters exist with faint but unmistakable evidence of die clashes, planchette flaws, and worst of all, what some experts believe may be phantom die trials. Unauthorized test strikes that somehow entered circulation under circumstances still unclear to this day. And here's where the story gets strange. Multiple collectors, completely unrelated, started finding quarters where Washington's bust seems off, not just doubled, but split, as if an earlier impression was struck and then misaligned, only to be restruck again at a slightly different angle, creating the eerie illusion of a face caught mid-shift, like a time-lapse gone wrong. And this isn't ordinary machine doubling. We're talking about true, deep, design-level doubling on elements like the word liberty, where the letters appear to have been pulled from a shadow dimension, offset by fractions of a millimeter that make them shimmer under angled light. And then there's the mint mark, the humble P that should sit clean and consistent on every Philadelphia coin. Yet dozens of these 1987 specimens have shown anomalies ranging from a barely there impression to a wildly mispunched mark tilted at an unnatural angle, as if the punch itself was guided by an untrained hand, or worse, automated equipment that malfunctioned without anyone noticing, or perhaps noticing but choosing to look the other way. And it begs the question, what the hell was happening inside the Philadelphia Mint in 1987? Why are there no surviving memos, no reports, no internal audit records discussing the extremely high number of flawed quarters during that year, especially considering that 1987 saw no circulation strikes from the San Francisco Mint, meaning old pressure was on Philly to handle the demand, and that pressure might have led to shortcuts, to corner cutting, to desperate measures involving repurposed dies or defective blanks rushed into production to keep up with quotas. And those shortcuts might explain the planchette flaws some of these quarters display: surface laminations, odd metal striations, and finned rims that normally get caught during quality control but slipped through during a period when staffing shortages and machine overuse were quietly plaguing the mint. And what's worse is that a growing theory suggests some of these era coins weren't just accidents, but tests, unauthorized experimental strikes using alternate metal compositions or off-type planchettes, possibly sourced from canceled commemorative programs or leftover Canadian blanks that were mistakenly fed into quarter presses during a chaotic production window. And that might explain why some 1987 P-quarters produce an off-pitch ring when dropped, a dead giveaway to metallurgists that something's wrong with the alloy mixture, something that no official records acknowledge, and no one in the Mint wants to discuss, even when confronted directly, because the moment you start asking questions about these quarters, you run into a brick wall of evasive answers. Missing documents and awkward silences, and maybe that's just a coincidence, or maybe it's the tip of something deeper, something institutional, systematic, and deliberately concealed. And yet, the more you dig, the weirder it gets. Because collectors from all corners of the country, from seasoned coin show veterans to backyard hobbyists, began reporting eerily similar findings. Faint impressions of a second design underneath the standard Washington bust, subtle but undeniable traces of alternate devices, including ghost-like outlines of the eagle's wings in completely wrong orientations or what looked like an aborted design element half swallowed by the metal, almost as if the coin had been struck once with a prototype die, erased, and then struck again with the standard one. And the implications of that are staggering, because that would suggest either a catastrophic die mix-up or a shadowy in-house testing process that slipped into circulation, which should be impossible, but clearly isn't, because now there are dozens, maybe hundreds of known specimens, each with their own freakish variations, one with a perfectly centered bust but a completely off-kilter rim alignment, leaving an unnaturally thick border on one side and razor-thin on the other. Another with E pluribus unum ghosted twice on the reverse, as if the reverse die had reset mid-strike. And most chillingly, coins with invisible designer initials or mysterious extra lines that look like faint tool marks, almost surgical. Incisions in the field of the coin, which led some experts to theorize these quarters, were never meant to pass through the standard production line at all, and might instead have been handled in a testing chamber or private engraving room where die experiments were being conducted under classified conditions, possibly for future state quarter planning, die-hardened material trials, or unauthorized artistic redesigns that were never greenlit, and yet somehow some of those pieces slipped out, unintentionally or by the hand of an insider, into the hands of the public, and the mystery deepens when you consider that many of these quarters share one deeply disturbing trait. They're perfectly normal from a distance, but under magnification, they reveal chaos, tilted devices, off-centered legends, microdoubled lettering, rim cuts forming partial crescents, clash marks that don't match any known die combinations. And if that sounds like a stretch, consider that even the American Numismatic Association has documented select specimens from 1987P with characteristics not consistent with standard quarter design parameters, but declined to pursue further investigation due to incomplete provenance and insufficient archival materials, which is bureaucratic speak for we have no idea what these are, and we're scared to dig further. And what adds gasoline to the fire is that a few of these quarters, when weighed, show discrepancies not large enough to signal counterfeiting, but just significant enough to suggest non-standard planchette sources, possibly coming from nickel-clad blanks intended for rejected dollar coin programs like the scrapped Susan B. Anthony phase-out tests or leftover bicentennial trials, which shouldn't have been available in the Mint's inventory by 1987, but somehow seem to be reflected in these anomalies. And then you hear stories, not rumors, but first-hand accounts from retired Mint workers who described 1987 as a chaotic year, a time when machines were pushed to the brink, when quarter presses were being run round the clock due to congressional budget delays and a spike in coin demand that had leadership scrambling for output quotas. And this pressure led to the temporary reuse of older dies, an unheard-of practice that could explain the mismatched design layers or unexplained repunched features, particularly in Washington's neckline and the crossbars of the E in Liberty, where some examples appear carved, not struck, as if hand-edited, and that leads to the truly unsettling possibility that some of these coins were manually altered dies. Test modified by Mint engravers trying out alternate font weights, spacing tolerances, or re-engraving techniques. And then, through either negligence, oversight, or rebellion, those altered dies were mounted onto presses and used during regular production, creating a handful of ghost coins that share almost all characteristics with regular quarters, but diverge just enough to mark them as mutational outliers. Evolutionary accidents in a system built on sameness. And here's where the story morphs from curiosity to conspiracy. Because after these coins started surfacing in the late 1990s, Several noted collectors who documented large numbers of them had their personal websites taken offline due to unexplained copyright complaints, and their private forums mysteriously vanished or were deleted from indexing by major search engines. And while that might sound like coincidence, consider this: a Freedom of Information Act request filed in 2008 asking for detailed production. Logs of 1987 P-quarter runs was returned months later with most of the data redacted. Next, what if a small mistake made it one of the rarest coins ever struck, and what if that mistake wasn't caught for decades hiding in plain sight in pocket? Change cash drawers and forgotten coin jars across the country. What if a single overlooked decision inside the Denver Mint in 1996 spiraled into one of the most complex and chilling coin anomalies ever recorded? And what if this wasn't just a story of human error, but of cover-ups, lost documentation, and unexplained production decisions that have numismatists divided to this day? Because buried beneath the ordinary face of the 1996D quarter lies a legacy of unexplained phenomena, errors so precise and so persistent that they raise more questions than answers and compel even the most skeptical collectors to wonder how deep this mystery truly runs and how many other anomalies have been erased from the record books. And it all starts in the heart of a year that was supposed to be unremarkable, 1996, a year that minted billions of quarters, but for some reason produced one batch so strange, so inconsistent, so defiantly abnormal that entire research groups have been built around tracking the patterns, the clues, and the terrifying implications of what slipped through the cracks, because some 1996D quarters began surfacing with subtle but undeniable doubling on the obverse, not the dramatic kind seen in known double die varieties, but a soft spectral echo around the letters in Liberty and In God We Trust, a ghost of a strike just barely visible when tilted to the light, suggesting a die clash or possibly a misaligned restrike. But these were not isolated cases, and when coin experts started comparing samples, they began noticing a strange trend. The doubling varied from coin to coin, not just in placement but in depth and clarity, hinting at multiple dies affected or perhaps an entire phase of production using flawed equipment. And worse, some coins showed evidence of having been struck with improperly annealed planchettes, producing a grainy pitted surface under magnification, which alone would raise eyebrows, but combined with the doubling and the growing list of inconsistencies pointed to something far more unsettling. And then came the mint mark anomalies, because while the 1996D quarter is supposed to bear a crisp, evenly placed D mint mark position near the right of Washington's ponytail, multiple verified specimens appeared with misplaced or malformed D, some pushed far left, others faintly overpunched or showing remnants of what might be a P or S hidden beneath the surface, leading to wild but not entirely dismissible theories that some planchettes or dies from other mints may have been accidentally or intentionally diverted into Denver production. And when former mint employees were asked about the possibility of cross-mint contamination, the response was telling: not a denial, but a consistent echo of no comment. And that silence was louder than any confirmation, because it signaled fear, or at the very least an unwillingness to revisit what many now believe was a production anomaly that was identified internally but never publicly acknowledged, and that alone would make the 1996D quarter worth investigating. But it doesn't stop there, because some coins emerged with rim cut errors, broken rims that look like miniature cliffs, as if the coin was sheared during ejection. Others showed evidence of feeder finger damage, contact marks so precisely repeated across different specimens that they could only have come from a misaligned mechanical component. And then the most disturbing discovery of all: the Shadow Washington, a series of 1996D quarters where the bust of George Washington appears doubled, but not in the traditional sense, rather as if another image is trapped beneath it at a different rotation angle, as if two different dies were used consecutively without properly resetting alignment, and the resulting impression looks like a blurred motion photograph etched into metal. And numismatists struggled to explain it because it doesn't fit existing day clash patterns, and yet it has been found on multiple authenticated coins from different parts of the country, suggesting not a one-off error, but a systematic issue that may have persisted over weeks, if not months. And as the community dug deeper, they began comparing the reading, the microscopic edge striations, the metallurgical composition, and even ultraviolet reflectivity, and what they found only fueled the conspiracy, because not only do some 1996D quarters have incorrect reading counts, but others fluoresce under blacklight, a trait seen only in experimental planchettes, tested for new anti-counterfeit technologies, and to this day no official record exists of such testing on quarter planchettes in 1996, and yet here they are, physical evidence of something unspoken. And when collectors began tracing these anomalous coins, they found that many originated in regional banks across a narrow corridor of southwestern states, a distribution pattern too specific to ignore, and when plotted on a map, they formed a shape not unlike the Denver Mint's regional release distribution zones for test coinage, raising the possibility that a batch of experimental or rejected strikes had been silently circulated, perhaps due to a clerical error, or perhaps as part of a larger unspoken test of how long it would take for the public to notice. And that brings us to the collectors themselves, those who have made it their life mission to understand the truth behind the 1996D quarter, and their stories are as intense as the coins they pursue. One collector reported finding a 1996D with partial brockage, a faint mirror image of the reverse pressed into the obverse, and upon further investigation discovered microscopic traces of dye grease trapped in the design, a sign of intentional dye overuse or poor maintenance. And another found a quarter with completely missing initials, a bare field beneath Washington's neckline where JF should sit, and metallurgical scans showed no evidence of post-mint tampering, suggesting it was struck without those initials at all. A terrifying thought, if true, because it means at least one dye was released without the full master design. And what does that say about mint quality control or record keeping? And then the whistleblower, the anonymous email sent to a numismatic forum in 2014 claiming to be from a former Denver mint technician who alleged that in late 1995 and early 1996 a series of test dyes were produced using alternate alloy blends and altered design dimensions as part of a then scrapped high-efficiency minting project, and that some of these test strikes were mistakenly mixed into general production after the project was abandoned. And while the identity of the whistleblower was never confirmed, several details they provided matched known internal terminology and unpublished specs that only a true insider could know. And while the Mint has never commented publicly on this claim, they also haven't denied it, and the numismatic community has been left to chase shadows ever since. And if all of this feels like a thriller novel, remember, we're still talking about a quarter, a mass-produced everyday coin that somehow defies the laws of mass production by existing in multiple verified variants with overlapping yet inconsistent anomalies, and as more specimens are found, the list grows. Coins with dye polish lines in the wrong direction, ghostly impressions of unknown devices beneath the reverse lettering, strange stress fractures suggesting overpressure strikes, and even quarters that ring with an off tone when dropped, indicating non-standard metal composition. And each discovery raises new questions. Was the 1996D quarter a victim of chaos, a convergence of production flaws and human error, or was it the front line of an internal experiment that went too far and was buried under decades of silence? And either answer is chilling, because both suggest a breakdown in the Mint's most sacred principles: consistency, traceability, and transparency. And if the Mint can't fully account for what happened in 1996, what other years might hide similar secrets, and what other coins are out there quietly waiting to be discovered, misfits of the minting process, bearing the marks of a forgotten chapter in American numismatic history? And maybe you already have one in your possession. Maybe it's hiding in your change tray right now, waiting for you to notice the ghost in the metal, the echo of a mistake or an experiment that was never supposed to see the light of day but slipped through anyway, and in doing so became not just a coin, but a question mark, a silent challenge to the official record, and an invitation to look deeper, to dig harder, and to never accept the surface of things at face value again. Because the truth of the 1996D quarter isn't just about metal or machines, it's about the people who made it, the ones who saw too much, the ones who said too little, and the ones like you who are just beginning to understand that sometimes the rarest things are the ones hiding in plain sight and just When you think the rabbit hole ends, it opens even wider because there are still reports coming in of 1996 D quarters exhibiting design elements not found in any master die archives, such as obverses with anomalous denticle spacing or reverse shields, that show evidence of tooling inconsistent with quarter specifications entirely, as though another denomination's template had been mistakenly applied or overlapped, and some collectors have begun submitting their finds for 3D mapping and advanced scanning technologies to model micro-warping in the coin fields, not visible to the naked eye, and the results so far are disturbing. Early modeling data suggests a subset of these coins may have been struck with improperly aligned die collars, leading to uneven force distribution and micro-warping, patterns indicative of high-speed testing rigs equipment that wasn't even documented at Denver until years later, which raises another chilling possibility. Next, what if a small mistake made it one of the rarest coins ever struck? And what if that mistake wasn't even a mistake, but a shadow decision never documented and quietly buried beneath layers of bureaucracy and time? What if a single quarter, minted in 1973, a year sandwiched between the turbulence of the early 70s and the transformation of American coinage, slowly revealed itself to be something far more than a simple product of its minting year? What if the 1973 quarter held secrets from inside the U.S. Mint that no one was ever supposed to uncover, errors so obscure that only after decades of obsessive scrutiny did collectors begin to piece together the terrifying patterns of inconsistency, mechanical breakdown, and whispered oversight that surrounded the coin's creation? And what if the anomalies began not on the production line but in the archives themselves? Because the story of the 1973 quarter is not just about a coin, it's about the silent friction between precision and imperfection, the hidden tension between protocol and deviation, the moment where the American minting machine momentarily lost control and gave birth to a rogue series of coins that would go on to haunt the numismatic world with questions no one could answer. And it began with the discovery of strange doubling on the obverse letters of multiple 1973 quarters, doubling that didn't match known die varieties or follow standard classifications, doubling that occurred only under specific lighting angles and seemed to drift off the coin like an echo frozen in time. And while one or two examples could be dismissed as mechanical doubling, the patterns were too repeatable, too precise, too uniform to ignore. And then the real puzzle began: coins with missing mint marks showing up in circulation, but not just worn or obscured mint marks, completely absent from their designated space with no damage or trace of imprint. And as numismatists examined these coins further, they uncovered deeper inconsistencies. Some bore clash marks so faint and misaligned they suggested a die alignment issue not documented in any official mint report for 1973, while others had reading inconsistencies, rim thickness variations, and in one disturbing case, a quarter that showed what looked like a partial reverse impression over the obverse, creating a ghost-like double image, as if two realities of the same coin had collided during production. And while theories ranged from accidental die swaps to double striking anomalies, none could fully explain the irregularities found in quarters that, by all records, should have been produced with exacting uniformity. And then came the metallurgical tests, revealing that certain 1973 quarters appeared to be struck on planchettes with non-standard alloy ratios, some with a higher percentage of nickel, or with trace elements not found in official compositions, suggesting that experimental or incorrect planchettes may have been used, perhaps in error, or perhaps during a quiet trial phase that was never approved. And when researchers attempted to trace the origins of these planchettes, they hit a wall. Official documents from the U.S. Mint for late 1972 to mid-1973 were mysteriously incomplete, with certain production records marked confidential or missing entirely, and former mint workers interviewed under anonymity hinted at a chaotic time internally, a period of equipment overhaul, scheduling conflicts, and off-the-books production tests for new machinery that was never fully implemented. And while the Mint would later attribute the missing documents to routine archival errors, that explanation failed to account for the increasing number of 1973 quarters surfacing with inexplicable design anomalies, some showing a soft receding strike as if the die had been pulled away, Mid-impression others with sharply tilted design orientation were Washington's profile. Appeared rotated a few degrees from normal alignment, and the deeper researchers dug the stranger. It got coins with unusually high relief details, with excessive polished lines that intersected unnaturally in the fields, reverse eagles with distorted wing feathers or missing arrows, coins struck off-center or partially on clipped planchettes with no consistency as to which mint the errors came from, and perhaps most disturbing of all were the accounts of collectors, who independently found 1973 quarters with faint impressions of completely different devices beneath the surface. Faint as if another die type had once existed for this coin and was later abandoned and filed away, but not before leaving a spectral impression on a handful of planchettes. And then the whispers began about a lost die trial, a theoretical prototype prepared for a quarter redesign that was scrapped before public release and allegedly struck during a brief unauthorized test phase in early 1973 using altered die dimensions and a unique striking sequence that left behind barely perceptible artifacts on test coins before the dies were destroyed or hidden. And when word of this possibility surfaced, veteran collectors began comparing notes across decades and regions, compiling sightings of the so-called phantom strike, the mysterious coin that seemed to appear once in 100,000 and always bore some strange inconsistency. And those who pursued these coins became obsessed, mapping mint distribution routes for 1973, examining coin rolls with microscopes, scanning each quarter for anomalies, and following leads from estate sales and closed archives, all in pursuit of a pattern, a map, a reason why so many things could go wrong on a coin that should have been so simple. And then came the expert testimonies, including metallurgists who examined coins showing planchette separation, microlamination, and inexplicable grain patterns indicating planchettes that had either been overcompressed or exposed to atypical environmental conditions before striking, and die specialists who confirmed that certain 1973 quarters bore signs of misaligned reassembly between obverse and reverse dies, suggesting mid-production maintenance or rushed die switching. That left no trace in official logs, and even insiders began to acknowledge the pattern, with one retired supervisor claiming in a recorded interview that the Denver press room in '73 was not exactly a place of perfect oversight, a chilling admission, given that many of the most bizarre 1973 quarters trace back to Denver mint rolls. And just as the mystery was gaining national attention, another layer emerged: reverse dies with inconsistent serif sharpness on the Et pluribus unum legend coins, where some letters appeared sharper or bolder than others, despite being struck from the same supposed die discrepancy. Impossible under normal striking conditions, and collectors dubbed them whisper dies, as if the coin was only half spoken by the machine that made it. And then someone noticed something truly wild: several of the most unusual 1973 quarters bore reverse details that, when compared digitally, matched no other coin in U.S. circulation exactly, with proportions slightly off curvature, slightly altered, the shield device compressed, or the eagle's feathers misaligned, as if they had been struck from a different engraving master entirely. And this begged a dangerous question: had there been an experimental reverse design for the 1973 quarter, a variation that was quietly tested and then erased from the public record? And if so, how many of those test coins still exist in the wild, unidentified, unlabeled hiding in junk drawers and soda machines around the country? And what would it mean for the history of U.S. coinage if the mint had conducted unauthorized trials under the radar with dies that left just enough physical evidence to keep collectors chasing shadows 50 years later? And as stories spread, so too did the community of believers, those who had seen the ghost impressions, the vanishing initials, the bizarre mint mark placements that defied official records, including one 1973 quarter where the D mint mark was so deeply punched it tore the surface of the coin, curling the metal outward, and another where no mint mark appeared at all, yet testing confirmed it had not originated in Philadelphia, but rather bore microchemical signatures consistent with Denver planchettes. And more cases poured in, one showing a double clash strike with partial reverse lettering embedded into Washington's cheek, another with a collar clash that produced a faint ring around the entire circumference of the obverse, and as each new anomaly was uncovered, the story grew more complex, and the legend of the 1973 quarter morphed from trivia to obsession, from coincidence to conspiracy, and now the hunt has become a modern treasure saga fueled not by the hope of wealth, but by the allure of solving a puzzle that the government refuses to acknowledge. A chase through coin shows, basements, flea markets, and inheritance boxes. A nationwide manhunt for the next piece of the pattern, and maybe, just maybe, the final answer to what happened in the mints of 1973 when something slipped past the guards and into circulation, something that was never supposed to be made, but once made refused to disappear quietly, and perhaps lies, even now in your pocket, waiting to be noticed and remembered and questioned all over again. Next, we dive headfirst into a mystery so dense with contradiction, so heavy with unanswered questions, that even veteran numismatists tread lightly when whispering its name, the 1989p quarter dollar, a coin that by all accounts should be unremarkable. Just another in the long line of Washington quarters minted in Philadelphia during the late 20th century. And yet, for those who know what to look for, those who've spent years chasing anomalies in the worn grooves of American currency, it's become a coin shrouded in layers of myth, malfunction, and what some call deliberate deception. Because what if a small mistake in the blindingly fast, heavily automated production process of 1989 gave birth to one of the rarest quarters ever struck, not due to its scarcity in number, but in the sheer volume of unexplained phenomena packed into its humble surface, starting with the reports that began trickling in just months after its release, coins found with nearly invisible mint marks, others with ghosted devices beneath the bust of Washington, the hint of another strike so faint it could only be seen under angled light, leading to rumors of a multi-strike that was never recorded, never approved, never explained, and it didn't stop there, because soon collectors across the Northeast started sharing images of 1989p, quarters that seemed to defy standard die alignment, with obverses rotated slightly off-axis, barely perceptible to the naked eye but unmistakable under the precision of a coin scope. And what do you do when a pattern begins to emerge, when dozens, then hundreds of these so-called off-planchette phantoms are located in random circulation, usually from bankrolls or old family coin jars, bearing subtle but consistent indicators of being struck from reused or misaligned dies? Anomalies that should have been caught by mint inspectors but weren't, can't be, or maybe just maybe were never meant to be. And here's where the questions multiply like shadows at dusk, because several of these coins exhibit die clashes. With no known match in any other quarter of that year, designs struck atop phantom imprints, faded remnants of other coins, or perhaps experimental dies that never made it to the production floor. And then there's the issue of the planchette flaws specimens, bearing deep lamination cracks, sudden discoloration bands, or metallurgical inconsistencies that scream test batch, coins that feel wrong in the hand, as if their alloy mix had shifted mid-pour, and metallurgists quietly asked to analyze these samples reported trace amounts of tin or lead, elements not standard in clad quarter composition. And while the mint denied everything, insisting that no such deviation occurred, one retired technician under condition of anonymity claimed that 1989 was a transition year for internal machinery upgrades, where old die-setting equipment was briefly used on new high-speed presses. And during that window, countless unofficial tests were conducted using live currency stock, an accusation the mint never officially responded to. But the existence of a 1989p quarter with clear doubling on the date, yet no signs of die wear, suggests fresh dies were modified mid-use, possibly by hand. And what else could explain the mysterious quarters with an almost proof-like sheen, the kind of semi-reflective finish seen on special issues, not standard circulation strikes? Yet here they are, reported from Tennessee, Iowa, and even as far as Alaska, coins with unusually sharp relief, strong device separation, and reverse eagles so clean they look like pre-production samples. And then there's the most jarring discovery of all, the initials FG for designer. Frank Gasparo are in several samples either completely missing or altered so subtly that they appear to be overwritten or shifted slightly downward, as if the field was touched up post-strike, but who would go to the trouble of post-strike? Field modifications on circulating quarters unless something more secretive was at play. And this is where the speculation spirals into dangerous territory, because internal Mint memos released years later mention Class 2 production deviations during late 1989, without explanation, just buried inside quarterly manufacturing. Audits that never mention specific coin types, but experts believe this may reference a batch of quarters struck during off-schedule hours using alternate die sets, either for training, calibration, or clandestine trial runs related to a never-released bicentennial commemorative design update, one that was shelved indefinitely but may have had its dies mistakenly or deliberately reused during routine production runs. And when you layer all that with the forensic evidence die cracks that curve in unnatural patterns, repunched mint marks that don't align with the original, coins that fluoresce faintly under UV light due to residual washing agents, not used in public production, it becomes clear that the 1989p quarter isn't just a mistake. It's a window into a moment in mint history where the line between testing and production blurred, and oversight gave way to a kind of sanctioned chaos all under the radar, and the collectors who've dedicated their lives to this coin describe it not as a collectible, but as a puzzle, a living riddle that gets stranger with every new find, like the Pennsylvania specimen found in a church donation box in 2006, with no reading on its edge and a recessed field so deep it resembled a medallion, or the North Carolina coin discovered in a box of state quarters misfiled, overlooked and nearly spent bearing what appears to be a doubled motto so crisp it cuts through the copper nickel like a whisper through glass. And these aren't isolated cases, because underground coin forums are buzzing with 1989p finds, each weirder than the last, from off-center strikes that wrap text around the coin's edge like a spiral, to design distortions that seem to fade in and out depending on angle and lighting, and still the mint offers no explanation, no data, no clarity, and maybe that's the point. Because if you admit these coins exist, you admit the system broke. Or, worse, you admit it functioned exactly as someone intended, creating a wave of untraceable anomalies that now haunt the collecting world like digital ghosts in physical metal. And maybe that's why seasoned experts grow quiet when asked about the 1989p, why no official guidebook has dared catalog the known variants, and why, after all these years, we're still asking, how many are out there? What secrets were stamped into their surfaces? And will we ever uncover the full truth behind one of the most compelling and confounding mysteries ever minted into American pocket change?